And now to introduce our sterling panel for a lively discussion about the art of casting. And let me introduce the moderator of the panel, the president of the Casting Society of America, Richard Hicks.
It's a testament to the impact that Marion had on so many people's lives that we have such an esteemed panel here today. I think you're all up there. Let me see. Let me introduce Bernard Rose, who worked with Marion twice in an adaptation of Anna Karenina, I believe, and Immortal Beloved, one of Gary Oldman's most fantastic films. He's got a film here at the festival, Boxing Day. Yeah, have a seat. Miss Deborah Zane, one of the top casting directors working in town today. She's cast amazing films, American Beauty, Catch Me If You Can, Hunger Games 2, Hunger Games 3, 4, and 7. Where are you? Oh, show some over there. Oh, there we go. Who's next? I guess, let me introduce Mr. John Lithgow. He needs an introduction. So we can only, thank him for being here, and we're really honored that you valued Marion so much to be here.
And then finally, Lynn Stallmaster. Not bad.
At 85, he's still going strong. Hello, Lynn. Welcome. And last but not least, I want to introduce Tom Donahue. Filmmaker, the director of Casting Box.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for coming.
Not sitting?
I guess not. So let's.
Another chair?
Yeah, whatever. I can stand. How did you come to do this film? Talk to me about that.
Two amazing casting directors, Joanna Colbert and Kate Lacey, who was an executive at Disney. Were casting a film called Step Up back in 2006. And they were on hold together and they started chatting. And Joanna said, "Hey Kate, how did you get your start?" And Kate said, "I was Marion Doherty's last assistant." And Joanna said, "Oh my God, I was Juliet Taylor's intern." And so I think then Kate said, somebody should do something on Marion Doherty. So I was having coffee with Joanna that week, lucky me. And Joanna said, "I know how we can work together. Have you ever heard of Marion Doherty?" And I said, "No." And I went back to New York and I looked into it. I'm like, who's this Marion Doherty? She's a legendary casting director. Why have I never heard about her? And I went online and searched and searched and searched and found one interview with Marion Doherty in the student newspaper at the University of Oklahoma. And it was this great 3-page interview. And I learned all this stuff that I had never known before, though I had loved film since I was 7 years old. I had no idea how important the casting director was to the process of filmmaking. So I felt ashamed. I agreed to interview Marion, and in 2007 did a 12-hour interview, and my jaw dropped through the entire thing. And it started from there. And really Kate Lacey, who just was able to get all these amazing people into the film, including the amazing John Lithgow, who's an absolute genius. And that's kind of how it began.
Mm-hmm. And Lim, did you know Marion back in the day? Were you competitors? Were you friends? What was your relationship to her?
I always, whoops.
See, I'm the actor.
I always admired Marion from afar, and we may have talked once early on in the 50s, early 50s. But I didn't meet her until I was casting a film at Warner Brothers. And she was, of course, the executive. And that was the first time we'd been face to face. And that was in the 90s. But Tom and his team have created such a magnificent and perceptive honor to Marion, which she just richly deserved. And I salute him.
Thank you.
And speaking on behalf of the Casting Society of America, this film is the biggest gift given to casting directors.
Well, you guys richly deserve it for it.
So John, what was your first experience with Marion?
I think the first time I ever met her was she invited me down, or via my agent, I was brought down to the house.
What film was it?
It was The Candidate. Robert Redford's star. John helped me out. Michael Ritchie directed it, and I met the two of them in the house. Waited a good 45 minutes for Bob Redford to arrive, which they assured me was difficult. But they made it very, very comfortable. I chatted with Juliet and Marion and Gretchen, the whole gang, and I met with Bob. We chatted. It was a lovely time. I was actually offered the part, a small part that was eventually played by Michael Lerner, something I don't usually reveal. And I had to turn it down because I had just committed to an entire season of plays at Long Wharf Theatre. It broke my heart. Next time I dealt with her was over World According to Garp. And you just heard that story.
That's amazing. It's an amazing story. And what interests me about casting in relation to you is the turns that your career has taken. You know, World According to Garp, and then that turn into Third Rock from the Sun. And I wonder about the continuing contribution in the way that a casting director might be able to take an actor's career and help make that turn. And it's an interesting conundrum because the actor makes the turn, but the casting director is kind of the space in which that becomes possible.
Well, the fantastic thing about Marion, and I'm sure it's true of Lynn too, she just was so plugged in to what good actors were doing. She was aware of everything that was going on in New York. She had seen the various twists and turns of my career and the careers of all these people.
Right. So she had an encyclopedic knowledge which allowed her to take the leap of faith.
And you got some sense of how she sort of, the process that she went through this film. I'll give you a very good example.
Sure.
I actually told this story in the interview that I did with Kate, and I'm so glad it wasn't included in it because I would be so embarrassed if anyone heard this story.
Well, they won't.
Share
Don't
it with
worry.
all of you. My agent called and said that Marion wanted me to meet Tim Burton, who wanted to make a film out of Batman to play the Joker. And I thought, who wants to see a movie about Batman? At the time but Marion called me on the phone. She said, do you know the work of Tim Burton? I didn't. She said, go to see Beelzebub. Is that the name? Beetlejuice. Which I hadn't seen. I was in M. Butterfly at the time on Broadway, and I was completely exhausted all the time. It was such a draining show. So I never got around to seeing Beetlejuice. She brought Tim Burton to see me in M. Butterfly, and the next morning I went in to see Tim Burton with Marion in the room to play the role of the Joker. And I sat there. And I said, I am frankly so exhausted. If I did this role, I'm afraid I'd have to begin it the day after I closed in A Butterfly. And to be honest, the idea of playing a grotesque at this point in my career, I basically persuaded Tim Burton to not even think of me.
Got it. Good,
And Marion was looking at me the entire time with these steely eyes. You asshole. She's obviously been spending hours and hours persuading him to cast me.
Talking you up.
And the next day I heard that Robin Williams was being considered, that Jack Nicholson was in the running, but not I.
So we can set it up for you, but you have to walk through that door. Yes, indeed. Bernard, what was your experience with her on Immortal Beloved? Talk to me about that, because I find that to be a revelation in Gary Oldman's work for me. I thought that was beautifully rendered, and wondered, did he come attached? Was that somebody that she championed? Was it somebody you knew from the UK? How, what was that about?
Well, actually, the producer of the film was Mel Gibson. So it was Mel who introduced me to Marion.
Got it.
Obviously, he had a relationship with her, and his offices at the time were Warner Brothers. So although the film was made by Columbia, she was working on it kind of
independently.
Yeah, independently. I think the thing that I most remember about Marion was once she was bringing in people for various parts, and I wasn't sure about something that she was doing, and she said something about Seymour, so I thought she wanted to bring in Seymour Cassell. She meant, no, why do you want to see more? She had this thing that she said, honey, there's only one person who's right for the part. And it's what, she says that in the film, but she really believed that, and it really taught me something, because I made a few pictures, other pictures of England and work and things, and there is this thing that maybe I should see at least 10 people to make sure I've done my job.
Yes.
And she would say, no, there's one person, and it really taught me that a lot of the times, as directors, and certainly for producers and production executives, they're seeing more people purely to satisfy their egos.
That makes sense.
And you realize,
and it takes a tremendous amount of acuity.
I know actors. I like actors, unlike some directors, and I see what they go through when they have to be hauled in to read, especially if it's like a part that they like or a film that looks interesting. And you see how much work it is. Just someone says, "Oh, put yourself on tape," but that's like really a hard thing for somebody to do, and it's become such a habit, such an easy thing. Let's get 20 people on tape and put them all on a website, and I'll just click on them on my iPad while I'm eating lunch.
Yes.
And the amount of stress and effort they put people through to do that, and 9 times out of 10 it's a complete waste of time. And it's because really there is only one person for the job. That's the point.
Or one person that informs the character in this particular way.
Well, yeah, that's right. But I think what Marion did, which was before that era, and what she did that was so kind of, I think, significant and so much more actor friendly, was that she would meet people in person. She understood that the whole process of the audition was a flawed one. I mean, she says time and time again, it talks about casting people who gave bad auditions. I think now, especially the way the television business is set up, it's all about auditioning for this person, then for that person. There's like 8 levels of people that people are expected to go through the same rehashed audition with at full volume, as it were. So by the time they come to shoot it, they're so bored with the scene. How could you possibly,
Well, that's an interesting question, because like in our modern corporate movie making, where the tentpoles get bigger and the money gets more, and the executives, the rank of executives grow. How do you, Deb, in this environment, maximize the creativity of the casting director? And is there a way in which I would argue that a strong creative voice is more necessary than it ever has been, because you are the sole person looking out for the quality of the production, and that quality might be the one thing which allows it, people to fall in love with it and go see it. Or how do you deal with the corporatization of movie making now?
I think it's the job is the same, but it is definitely harder because, as you mentioned, the different layers of executives or job justifiers, I like to call them, and I suppose there's something that they're needed for within the studio system. But the truth is, I often find lately that you're talking to executives and sometimes even producers, if there are many producers, who you get the sense that they probably haven't read the script in a while. They'll talk about a part and they'll say, well, it's not a very big part, and you'll think that's a very big part, and you think, so you are in fact, you're protecting the story as a casting person and trying to consistently support the director, and by doing that you're often reminding the director, if the studio is pressuring them to go with, let's say, a more marketable name, reminding them of why the really important thing is to tell the story correctly with the right person.
Yeah, so that people will be passionate about experiencing it and pay money to do that. It's a conundrum because the power looks to be in the edifice of Hollywood, but the power is only supported by the enthusiasm of moviegoers, and that enthusiasm is powered by the truth and passion of the storytelling. Well, who shall I ask next? What was the most interesting bit of the film that you left out?
Debbie Zane, I think.
Why so?
Marcy Lirov. No, I interviewed 240 people for the film, including George Lucas, Morgan Freeman. The list goes on and on. And I unfortunately had to cut them out because I interviewed more and more people because everyone was so interesting and had so many interesting, enlightening stories. And I learned so much that I just kind of kept interviewing. But I realized
you left Lynn in.
Yeah, well, Lynn actually wasn't even supposed to be in the movie. I mean, it was a movie about Marion Doherty. But I said, hey, that woman, Lynn Stallmaster, I've seen her name on a million films. Hey, let's try to get her in. And so
that guy Wally Nacita. Yeah.
This guy walked in, and I'm like, hi, who are you? We're waiting on Lynn Stallmaster. No, he was Lynn Stallmaster. I had no idea. So I thought I had a half hour for him. We went 2 hours. It was like an interrogation. There were brick walls. And then I brought him back for a second interview, and then on the way back to his condo, he said, when I was casting Deliverance, I'm like, Deliverance? And we did a third interview. And I realized, if Marion was the queen of casting in New York, you had to talk about the king of casting in Hollywood. Because it wasn't just a film about Marion, it was a film about this profession that had developed out of the ashes of the studio system. And Lynn Stallman, it was a film called Casting By, which means it was a film about a credit. And the first person to get that credit was Lynn Stallmaster. So I realized my narrative could not have Lynn Stallmaster in it. And that became the big burden in the telling of the story. So this 2.5 hour cut had Deborah Zane in it and Marcy Lirov and everybody. And it just was too weighty and too all over the place. And I realized the story is about the queen in New York and the king in Hollywood, and I had to keep it to that.
And having done this film, what's your theory about why casting remains a relatively undervalued profession?
Well, it's undervalued. I think Martin Scorsese says it in the first line of the film, which is that casting is 95% of directing. I think he meant filmmaking, but he said 95% of directing. So if you take the credit for casting away from the director, if it's 95% of directing, then those guys are left with 5% of their job. So I think there is that kind of feeling that the casting director is pretty powerless, and the people with the power are going to grab the credit unless somebody stops them.
I know it's a fascinating space we occupy because it's not about our ego. It's about creating the space in which others can thrive, and so it's contributive and elemental, but it's not driven by the ego of the individual. Right. And I think that's one of the things. I'm intrigued by. I wonder how, because it's perceived to, because it's been a largely woman-dominated profession, has that contributed to its lack of respect?
Well, I think you can draw your own conclusions on that. But actually, even in during the studio system, it was mostly male. And there were these.
Was it mostly male when you started?
At the outset, I think it was. And I cannot emphasize enough how vital women were in my life. I would imagine that starting with Lee Stallmaster and up, let's say, to Mally Finn. Women were predominant in my office. They just seemed to have a special instinct and a special feel for this profession. And I want to really applaud all the women who are currently casting. And of course, Marion did spawn so many of you. And but it was mainly a male when I came in.
I have a question. So if Lynn was the first is it correct to say that Lynn was the first person to receive the casting by credit?
Single card.
On-screen single card
Yeah.
credit? And then how many years later did Marion finally get it?
Lynn got it in 1968 for Thomas Crown Affair. Marion got it in 1973 for Slaughterhouse-Five.
Takes a long time.
Yeah.
Same job, right?
Same job. Yeah, right.
The incredible thing for me, sitting and watching this with this audience, raise your hands if you're an actor out there. Good. Well, there's a good contingent. It's fantastic to have the world that we have to constantly operate in opened up to people who've never really thought about it. The whole thrill of being fingered by a casting director, seen and singled out and thought to be special and right for something, and the whole extraordinary process you go through, and the whole role of a casting director. It's really, I think it's just wonderful that you've done this film.
Thank you.
Because it just opens up a whole world that so many people are completely unaware of. And I had a really strong sense of that sitting in the audience. So many people around me, this is the first time they've seen this. It's old hat for me.
I also think it's interesting how would I say this? That was all about auditions and who came in and who got the part. Now, one of the jobs of the casting director is even more subterranean in that when you're talking about star names, you're trying to, like you wouldn't have had to come you wouldn't have been asked to audition for Third Rock from the Sun. They would have talked about different options and then decided that you were the person, and the casting director would have advocated for you, and the casting director wouldn't have not been in that room when you were sitting down with Carsey Werner. The contribution of a casting director, while vital, is so light of touch at times so as to be invisible, and I think that's part of why it's hard to find a foothold sometimes, because excellent casting is invisible casting.
Yeah. I'd like to actually say something that even beyond that, and something that Marion was brilliant at, is that we often forget that not just studio executives have decisions about what kind of star they want in the picture. Particularly when you're talking about foreign sales agents, you're talking about the great idiot wall of ignorance. And they have lists and charts about who's worth what in what territory, and believe you me, they show them to you. And they get very aggressive about it, and they say, you cannot have this person in this picture because we will not make this picture with this person. Now Marion just wouldn't have that. She would look at them and she would just with some sort of confidence sort of destroy that. And obviously it was easy to do at a place like Warner Brothers, who are handling their own foreign sales, and if you're setting up an independent picture over a certain price, it becomes a huge issue. But I think that it's one of the things that distinguishes the films that she made and were made in that era, and one of the things that hampers the films now is that very often the decisions are made by, who's worth what in what territory, irrespective of their suitability for the part. And that's complete.
Just today, really.
Yeah.
I'm saying that, and who's meaningful today.
Well, and the worst thing is that by the time the films got into international distribution,
Changing faster and
they're
faster.
6 years older than they should be.
Exactly.
And anybody who's supposed to be fresh, and whenever you see a fresh face in a film, it's so exciting. And Marion really understood that, and that's why she put so many people into films and would fight for them. And I think that's what you're really missing nowadays. And I think it's a real, and I think I love the film because, I knew Marion, I spent quite a bit of time with her, and when she died, I thought, oh, what a shame she died and nobody got all her stories. But you did, so well done. Thank you so much.
So let's talk a little bit about Taylor Hackford's position.
Do we have
Because
to?
he represents a significant voice in the Hollywood community. I don't think he speaks for just himself. Did you come across many other filmmakers who wouldn't say that on camera?
No, Taylor actually came to do the interview to praise Nancy Klopper, who's an amazing casting director, and he's worked with her for 30 years on Ray and Officer and a Gentleman and so many movies. And he started, when I asked him these kind of perfunctory questions about the Oscar and, should they be called casting directors, and he gave me that stuff, and I was like, wow. And I almost couldn't believe it, and I wanted to go and hug him and say, you just gave me a conflict. You just gave me the beginning of the second act. I'm not sure how happy he is about that, but yeah, that's it. He really meant what he said, and a lot. And he said afterward, "Listen, I know I'm not making any friends by saying this, but I'm not the only one who feels this way." And he was the only one who had the guts to say it in front of the camera.
But that voice, how do we as casting people, how do we combat that voice? What can we do now to deal with that mindset? That's what
I think ultimately that mindset, hopefully, I mean, I don't know the corporatization of media the way it is, but hopefully that mindset will fade away. Hopefully that old guard at the academy will fade away, and the new guard will see stuff like this and go, "Oh, the casting director, they're important. How come they don't have an Oscar?"
What do you think, you casting directors among you, what do you, Marion and you are all extraordinary at what you do. What do you think casting directors or casting associates could take away from this film that would most help move the profession forward? I'm talking to any casting director on this panel, and that's you, and that's you.
What we would take.
Like, what can a young person watching this film take away to be like Marion, to be as excellent as possible? Is there one thing, or are there things that she stands for that would serve as beacons to people coming up in the profession?
Well, I think it's when you believe in something, in an actor, or in anything in life, you stand up and speak.
Yeah.
And naturally, the director or anyone you might be employed by may not agree, but you want to go on the record of how you feel. And when you feel very strongly, which we all have on different occasions. By the way, I want to just interject something quickly. I was talking about all the great women who've been in my life and have contributed so much to my career. I want to point out one of my favorites, and so talented, David Rubin, who deserves to be recognized. But I think you learn to believe in your conviction.
Yeah, I used to want to be liked too much. I wanted to be seen as a hip casting director. I wanted to be seen as, it was about me. It wasn't about what the job was asking of me. And once I made that my priority, my way of relating to people changed. So that I was willing to, stand up, have an argument, or find other ways rather than hoping that I was seen to be the good one.
Most directors, and this happens to be my favorite word, are open to trying different approaches to characters. And sometimes they say, you were right. That does work. And so that's why you're engaged. Because you know the overall market, this enormous market of actors. Because I've also said this many times, you never know where or when you're going to find the answer that will satisfy him. So you have to have the courage to stand up.
As a star nowadays, if I may, what's your experience of casting directors now? Is it mostly nostalgic? Is it, do you come across us anymore? Because we would never, when do we get to see you in the room?
I don't want to inflate myself here, but I don't really see the casting directors. I get cast.
Yes, right.
And they're doing all their work. I learned today that I've been cast in a couple of things by both these people without my knowing.
Yes.
And I'm very proud of that.
We're very proud of it.
I think that there are people know I've done an awful lot of acting, and people know me extremely well and can reference lots of different things that I do and have done and can do. So I do get cast without coming in and auditioning or
Sure.
I had an interesting experience 2 years ago now, meeting with Judd Apatow to be in This Is 40, because he just wanted to meet with me because he can't write a character until he knows who's going to be playing it.
Okay.
So I went in to meet with Judd, and Leslie Mann was there, and we talked and talked. There was no casting director there, although I'm sure he has one. And he told me the entire story, the character, and he referred a couple of times to how he had worked with a couple of actors to get this far with this character just through improvs. And I said, well, Judd, if you're thinking of me playing this part, shouldn't I be doing improvs with you? And he was so relieved, because of course my agent had told him that I don't audition.
Right.
And Leslie and I improvised together about a half an hour. I saw the next draft of the script. I was cast that evening. Saw the next draft of the script 2 weeks later, and it was full of stuff from my improvisation. And I didn't even know who the character was yet. So there are all variations to this whole process. I guess that's a very long answer to your short question. I don't see casting directors very often.
I'm just intrigued by the invisible ways in which casting directors contribute to something and find themselves like the old girlfriend. You used to be really contributive, but now I'm having a fun time with this actor or this director, and thank you very much for coming, but I'm not going to give you an Oscar because I'm actually having an intense relationship with this person. Tell me.
Do you want to open it up?
Yeah, do we have time for questions?
Yeah.
Sure. You, sir.
My name's Eric Faber. I'm a talent manager based in New York. So I rely on casting directors like you to get work for my clients. And I'm wondering, are you seeing the future as your job being more political in terms of ceding power to the director and producer of a project? Or are you finding that you do have maybe more say in your choices, and what maybe is the percentage between the choices that you bring in and the choices that are politically motivated by others?
I would say that the politically motivated, if that's the right way of saying it, choices are not even really the director and producer, but a lot of it really comes from the studios and
What about like a TV series though, which is maybe smaller?
I still think the studios are very involved in a way that when I first began with David, I don't remember it as being so intrusive, and I remember much more autonomy and almost never having to, check in with even the casting studio person, because they sort of knew we were doing it, So so it is harder. I think it's harder now because when I first started, I don't think, as you were saying, marketing departments were even consulted in pre-production. It wasn't like, when you would make a movie, and then they would see the movie, and then they would work to sell the movie, and that actually was their job. And their job was not to tell you who would actually make the movie interesting or
But this is the world in which we work, so how do we maximize
I find it
what we
harder.
can do?
So therefore I find it harder because I really think that we are, again, the protectors of the story, and sometimes you have to remind even the directors and producers who are spending a lot of time in those studio meetings and those, budgetary meetings and stuff like that. You have to remind them of it. And I also feel, just to take it maybe one step further from what you're talking about, the whole process has changed so much with technology, so that, let's say in the old days when you would have a situation like Marion or Lynn, or even, the beginning with David, where you would have a lot of time with directors,
Now
and
it's all
actors.
sending it off on
Now
tape.
I find that, and this is the truth, rare. And the more frequent process is for us, the casting folks, to spend our time with actors and our video camera and auditioning, and then editing, and then creating a site that we put everything up, And then, as you were saying, then what my job becomes, because I am 100% convinced, and I said this to John earlier, that nobody watches that stuff. And I'm not surprised. And because I know that what they do is they'll click on something, they'll watch a few seconds of, let's say, a 1 minute and 24-second audition. They'll watch 14 seconds, I think, and then they'll say no. But then, so what I try to do is because they're usually not here, they're in Vancouver or they're in wherever they are, I try to get a phone date with them, and I sort of cozy up to their assistant to say, listen, I really want to watch these auditions with him on the phone. So, you know, if it's 12 o'clock my time and it's 3 o'clock in New York, I'll wait here. I put the site up on my computer and I wait, and then I can hear on the phone. I can hear them watching and I'm listening, and I can, like I said to John, if I know that someone in their 1 minute and 24-second audition doesn't really hit their stride until the minute is up, and then that last 24 seconds, and I say, hang on, keep watching. You know, I have to make sure they watch because you have to babysit. That's how I feel you have to do now.
It's wonderful for an actor to hear this, as I did. It was wonderful to hear that when you we talked about this, Deborah, because in a sense, casting directors are protecting actors too. They're very much on our side, and they're very often arguing the case. And it's an argument that we know nothing about. We only find out about it if we're lucky after the fact.
And because I do think the whole thing changed, from probably George Roy Hill and Marion's relationship and all of that, to the point where, because so many actors do self-tape, and a lot of that is because the whole globe has become our palette. You know, you can really talk about actors from anywhere in the world as long as they have, the English is not too heavily accented or whatever the complaint is. So I find myself often saying to the agent, can you ask him if he has any questions to call me before he gets, because I'm telling you, because I can see there's a trap in the scene and everyone's falling into this trap, and I want to be able to just say, don't fall into that trap when you do that scene.
It's speaking purely personally from having to watch these things that you're talking about uploaded onto websites. That I'm a writer as well, so I'm usually directing things I've written, and I literally cannot stand seeing hundreds of people do horrible versions of the scene. It makes me not want to shoot the scene. So I actually don't watch that stuff, and I've said to casting directors many times, and I know I got this from Marion, I didn't realize until I saw this movie. I said I don't want to see them do the scene, and I don't want to watch the tape, because when I'm watching the tape, I'm judging the photography. None of them know how to shoot. So I'm going, God, it's so badly lit. And it's like, so I'm judging the things that are nothing to do with the actor. When an actor comes into a room and sits down in front of you, you get energy from them.
If you're a good director.
And you understand if they can hold your attention.
And the most extraordinary example of that is Woody Allen. Having done a Woody Allen interview back in the 1970s, it lasted for no more than 30 seconds. He just wanted to be in the room for a moment with the actor. It was a very brief conversation. We didn't play the scene, and he didn't cast me in the interiors.
It's revealing a lot today. Let's see. Yes. Marcy actually has a story. Right there.
I want to congratulate you and thank you, Kate and Tom, for such an amazing educational love letter to casting directors. Really wonderful. So I have a John Lithgow story that I don't think you know. I was a young whippersnapper just starting out working for Mike Fenton and Jane Feinberg, and I was offered the movie Footloose. And the part for Reverend Shaw was written as a salt and pepper charismatic Paul Newman-esque type. And so I thought, okay, that's interesting. But I had just seen you in Garp playing a transsexual, and in Blowout playing a serial killer. And I thought, that's a lot more interesting. And so I brought you up to Herbert Ross, who scared the crap out of me. I was so young, and he was so intimidating. And he looked at me like I was absolutely crazy. But I said, trust me, this is the guy. So we brought you in, and this was before the days of videotape. We didn't even have videotape. You came in and you read one scene with me, and you read the scene where you confronted Ariel when she came home late after being out dancing. it's still, every time I tell the story, the hair raises on my arm, as it is right now. And you read this one scene, and Herbert said, will you play this role? He gave you the role in the room. Do you remember that?
Of course I remember that. How wonderful. Great to see you again. And you were good.
But that would never happen today because of, like you guys were talking about, all the people involved.
It happens to me when I'm taping the actor, though. It happens, but it happens. It's a
No, but no one gets can be offered.
Feel it.
The director could never say
Oh, I
you
see.
have the job because they have to call the executive, and then the executive has to go to that meeting with that. We're never present, and then they have to talk about it, and then they usually get to say no because if they don't say no, what is their job? Right?
Plus they have their favors.
Right. Which are always great ideas.
I remember actually Marion once having a casting session with me, and I was in a session with her in her office at Warner Brothers, and it was coming up to lunch, and I noticed a couple of very attractive girls sitting outside, and I was looking forward to them coming in, and Marion said, "Oh no, you can go to lunch now." I said, "Well, no. Well, there's a couple of people waiting to come in." She said, "No, you can go to lunch now." I said, "Why? You've got a couple of people coming in." She said, "Yeah, but you're not meeting them." Favors.
It's part of what we do. So, yes, sir.
My question's for Mr. Lithgow. I'm a 6'5" actor as well, so I admire you as a 6'4" man. So I wanted you to speak on the wisdom of casting directors you've met with over the years and how they might have cast you to play against type or cast you for something that a manager's stature wouldn't normally get.
The question is basically, how have I responded to casting directors and if I like them? I really can say honestly, I've never met a casting director I didn't like. Of course, that's partly politic, but it's true. And I have to say, Marion was my favorite of them all. I mean, we became really very, very good friends, and the whole experience of working with George Roy Hill, with her a constant presence, and Amanda Mackie always there, Juliet Taylor, it really was an amazing kind of family connection that I still feel with all those people.
And I think the best casting relationships still have that,
Yeah.
like you with Sam, or Linda Lowy with Peter Berg, or there are dozens of examples of the once the trust is established, the conversation can take a whole new level, and you can find a new level of creativity in what you do because you both trust each other.
And really, the thing that excites you about what you do is the most exciting thing about the business. It's something you really have in common with the actors, is combining the actor with the role.
For me, it's looking the actor in the eye and reading with them and watching it happen right in front of me. I find that amazing, and you've, a front row seat at that moment of creativity is a beautiful thing. You had a letter you would like to read?
Yeah, actually.
We got this letter yesterday from a friend of Lynn Stallmaster, and it's from John Travolta, and he wrote it yesterday. And he said, "Dearest Lynn," and then he apologizes for not being here. "What can I say to the man who changed Hollywood and made a difference forever by creating a whole era of film history? And the man who, if it weren't for him, I certainly wouldn't be here today and have had the success I've had. Congratulations, Lynn, on your epic career. I love you. Oh, and P.S. For those who should know, Lynn had so much influence and power in Hollywood, film companies would simply go with his ideas. Of course, he had a very gracious way of presenting these ideas. He was so influential that he never had to overwhelm anyone with these ideas. And he's one of the true humanitarians in the world, for he had to be. He cast the world's film characters, and they had to tell the stories. He's the best."
Yeah, I'll never forget when he walked in the office. Sometimes you can sense instantly that there's something very individual, special, that elevates one actor above many of the others. And of course I sense that with John. I don't know whether you brought this up, but when reading an actor, you really have to concentrate, because you can miss subtle little interpretation and reaction. And we must do that, you know, because it's our responsibility to the actor to give him the maximum attention and not be distracted. And I've always believed that. You know?
I think that's the most thrilling part of it. You know, that fine-tuned empathy that you have, that is created in that moment between the actor and the audience, and that's one of the things I love best
I think
about
one
it.
of the great advantages I've had, and many of you have had, is having been on the other side of the desk.
Mm-hmm. So you were an actor previously?
And suffered. Until they would hand me a script and let me prepare and read.
Mm-hmm.
But it's excruciating when you walk in early in your career and you don't know what to expect on the other side of the desk, you know?
Deb, were you an actress, or?
No, I studied, theater in college and stuff, but no. But I was thinking about the importance of our contribution, and I was thinking about something that Bill Condon once said in an interview. He was, some film he was promoting, and someone I work with and that John works with, and he said casting is for life. He talks about it being so important because...
What do you mean by that?
Say again?
What do you mean by that?
He means that, once the decision is made and the film is shot and then everybody sees it, that character is that actor forever. And so that is how important it is. It's a huge responsibility if you're really about telling stories.
That's lovely. And John, have you ever done any casting, or no?
Well, actually, when I started out, I was a director because I couldn't get any acting work. It took a little while for me to get started, and then I left directing behind. But I have certainly been in, like the third Rock from the Sun example. I was set for that show and was then in on the casting for all those other parts, and read with everyone we considered for all those parts. And it was a fascinating process.
What do you think you learned from it?
Well, I would say I learned far more when I was starting out as a director. I directed for my dad, who was the executive director, the artistic director of the McCarter Theater in Princeton. And he had a policy that anyone who sent in a picture in Reserve could get a 5-minute audition. Wow. And they had this, I was on a staff of 4 directors for my dad. And I went through this 3-day process that we called the cattle call, which was 5-minute interviews for about 100 actors. And this, I was only about 24, 25 years old, just starting out. And that was the best education I ever got as an actor on how to treat auditions. They are excruciating, brutal things to go through, particularly when you're starting. And what you learn is the actors you want are the actors that everybody wants. And the reason why you want them so badly is because they know everybody wants them. They don't particularly...
Or you want them so badly because they are the most capable, and therefore...
Well, no, it's got much more to do with their own sense of ease. Your sense of unease, because you just haven't got started yet. You haven't been given the chance. It almost gives you a bad smell. Marion knew all about that. A good casting director knows all about that. Yeah. And they ease an actor through that process. And that's why I love the good ones. And in my experience, they're all good at this.
Oh, well, Marion certainly was. So we have to wrap it up soon, but anybody want to say any last words in regards to this film?
I'll just say, if you guys make sure to vote for the audience award, that would be great.
Yes, everybody can vote. We need this to win. So thank you all for coming.
Thank you,
Richard. Thank you for contributing.